Playing Max Payne for the first time, it's hard not to see that there's something very special here. You can see the fingerprints of Remedy before they were the Remedy we know today, that are responsible for Alan Wake and Control. It's a game that leans into the darkness and the story and goes places most games would never attempt. Max Payne is unquestionably a very unique experience that deserves all of the praise that it's received over the years. That said, for many different reasons, playing through Max Payne was a fairly unenjoyable experience. There were things that I liked, but it was hampered by technical issues, bugs, and some design choices that I didn't particularly enjoy, and I'm not sure hold up that well today. Before I go any further, since this will be a fairly long, fairly negative video unfortunately, I want to say at the top, the original title of this video was going to be something along the lines of Desperately Needs a Remake. Turns out, Remedy is already working with Rockstar to remake the first two games, which is absolutely wonderful to hear. The game absolutely deserves it. More people should experience this game, and with Remedy on top of their game the last few years, those remakes could be incredible. Additionally, I will say, in a strange way, in spite of all of the issues and all of the hours of work trying to get the game to work enough to finish it, I actually like this game in a way. I just can't recommend it in its current state. This is absolutely not intended to just dump on a game that's 23 years old that so many people love. I know that's how some will perceive it, but that isn't the intent. The intent is to give my opinion on it and let people that have not played the game know how it holds up today. I'm not trying to answer the question, was Max Payne good? Many people have done that over the last 20 years. What I'm asking is, how good is Max Payne today? In this case, I'm specifically talking about the Steam version. So with that out of the way, I will talk about some of the good before I get into the bad. The atmosphere here is fantastic. In spite of the age and the texture quality, dirt and grime on the walls, the peeling wallpaper, the boarded up and bricked up windows and doors, the graffiti, and things like collapsing stairwells all paint a picture of an area of New York that's run down, dark, and dangerous. The writing and the dialogue are also fantastic in my opinion. Max is essentially narrating the story as you go, which I think works incredibly well, giving you story beats as you make your way from one set of goons to the next. The graphic novel-style cutscenes, while seemingly divisive, I very much enjoyed. Basically, from a creative and artistic standpoint, I really enjoyed this game. From pretty much every other standpoint, I did not enjoy Max Payne. Let's start with the technical issues. And again, I will say this is based on the Steam version. After launching the game and attempting to either play the tutorial or start a new game, I was prompted by a corrupt JPEG error that would repeat until I finally hard crashed. To fix that, I needed to download a hex editor to, I'm assuming, fix references to those files. I followed the instructions provided by a random video I found referenced on Reddit. I'll include a link in the description. It worked for me, but as with any video giving random technical instructions, use it at your own risk. So anyway, with that fixed, I proceeded to launch the game. And I discovered I had no sound, so I went back to finish the YouTube video. There I discovered that I needed to download an unofficial Max Payne sound patch. While using a hex editor on a game file didn't concern me at all, running a random batch script that could potentially do almost anything did not give me warm fuzzy feelings. However, I skimmed through the batch script, I didn't see anything alarming. There were also a lot of people recommending the fix, so I went ahead and ran it. It did resolve the sound issues. With that, I was able to launch the game, but the issues continued. The most obvious you probably have already noticed from the video, which is the white lines everywhere. While I'm not sure exactly why it's occurring, I can fairly confidently say that this is just an issue of hardware outpacing what was available at the time. My guess is it's resolution related, although I could see it being shadow related as well. I spent some time playing with the settings trying to get rid of them, but I eventually gave up and just learned to live with it. Next, I had several issues and bugs, some of which were likely due to age, others may have existed since launch. The first is various issues with triggers in the game where your character is supposed to cross an invisible spot on the map, and then something is supposed to happen. On several occasions, that something that was supposed to happen didn't. In some cases, I was stuck, unable to proceed until I randomly walked across the right spot, which would trigger whatever failed to happen the first time. Another issue that I discovered only after finishing the game is apparently there is a bug with difficulty related to quick reloading from saves. To give some background, Max Payne has dynamic difficulty in addition to the difficulties you select when you start the game. If you start doing well, the game is going to start increasing the difficulty. If you die, it should lower the difficulty. That is my understanding based on reading several threads on the topic. There are a couple noteworthy points here though. First, the difficulty can scale up dramatically. meaning that you may turn the wrong corner, and if there's a couple of enemies there, you are just dead, even at full health, even on the easiest difficulty. But in theory, then the difficulty should drop since you died, right? Well, about that. So, apparently based on all of the reading I did, the difficulty is lowered when the death animation for Max completes. But the game gives you a quick reload, which allows you to skip the long death animation and get right back into the action. Essentially, the better you play, the harder the game gets. And then the harder the game gets, at least in my case, the less likely you are to be patient enough to sit and watch a lengthy death animation when you could just hit F6 and instantly start playing again. But by doing that, the difficulty is not getting lowered, and eventually you survive those difficult enemies, and the difficulty increases. Again, this is based on Reddit threads and forum posts, so there's no good way for me to confirm it. However, from my personal experience, it absolutely supports this theory. I hit F6 almost immediately when the death animation would start, sometimes even slightly before, and the game was absolutely brutal in parts. But on rare occasions, after many deaths, I did have to sit back and take a deep breath, try to compose myself, try not to smash anything, and the death animation would complete. And when I would reload, I would manage to get past a bunch of enemies that had been giving me a lot of trouble. At the time, I had no idea there was a dynamic difficulty, but I do remember thinking, maybe the game just feels sorry for me. So that was a lot about the difficulty, and it was the second most annoying issue that I encountered. But it still pales in comparison to the misery that was being glued to the floor during the 2 nightmare sequences. So, light spoilers here. There are 2 nightmare sequences that involve a bunch of platforming. During that sequence, the audio is very unpleasant. The room is dark, and the platforming is, well, platforming in a third-person shooter. It's also a maze, so if you choose the wrong path, you'll need to backtrack. All of that would have been manageable. However, during the first nightmare sequence, I started to notice that if I got close to walls, I would stick to them slightly. And my jumps frequently didn't work properly. Instead of jumping, I would stay stuck to the floor slightly and then slide off the platform. Or I would jump and then the character would kind of hesitate and again I'd fall off the platform. I made it through, but it was very annoying. Then, by the second nightmare sequence, you get what you see in the video now. I was almost completely stuck to the floor or a wall. If I was too close to a wall, I would be unable to get unstuck from that wall. Occasionally, after a dozen rolls or so, I might get unstuck, but then the next wall I came even close to, I would end up stuck to again. Once I got through the starting area, I couldn't make any of the jumps and I would just slide off the platform. It was at this point, after 30 minutes, I decided I wouldn't finish the game. But then I decided to try to find out how other people got through it. The answer was to run sideways and then use the bullet time jump. It still wouldn't work all of the time, but sometimes it apparently would. So with that, I had my answer, but I had no interest in trying to get through the game that way. Then I clicked on just one more thread before I went to bed, and I found someone attempting to play the PlayStation 2 version being endlessly mocked for not playing the, quote, far superior PC version. And with that, I stubbornly decided I would finish this far superior version of the game and document. It took me roughly an hour. An hour of trying to work through the maze with the miserable audio, which I did eventually realize I just needed to turn down. I tried cheats like no clip, higher jumps, and so on. The only thing that worked was the sideways bullet time jumps. But for me, it only worked maybe 1 out of every 10 or 20 times. But with every successful jump, I would save, and I would make it a little further, until I found a dead end and then I had to double back. But an hour later, I did finish that section. So those are the issues and bugs, and they are the main reason I can't recommend this game. However, there are several things here that I didn't enjoy or I don't think hold up well. First, the shooting. It's not for me. I won't go so far as to call it bad or even dated, but it is highly inaccurate, which is clearly intentional. The enemies are also very bullet spongy, which again is very intentional, although I can't be sure how much of that is because of the bug with the difficulty, and there's really no good way for me to know. The bullet time is cool, but there is a portion of the animation where you are entirely exposed, and again, with the difficulty issues, you could be killed easily before you could react, or your character would even stand up. So it meant that some of the cool stuff that I wanted to do, I usually was punished for, and instead I ended up playing very conservatively in a game that really didn't feel like that was the intention. Again though, the difficulty issue could be a major factor here. The triggers or monster closet style enemy spawns are also something I have always hated. Even when it was standard in basically all shooters, I absolutely hated it then, I still hate it today. Pretty much the entire game is a series of trigger points that spawn enemies. If you see some boxes of ammo on a table, you can be almost certain that as soon as you approach that table, 3 enemies will spawn. Sometimes it'll be 2 or 4, but it's almost always 3. This also happens the entire time you move through levels as well. You walk past a certain invisible point, and the enemies spawn. They don't actually spawn where you can see them, however, if you see a couple boxes standing somewhere, or you see a hallway, you can be almost guaranteed that's where the enemies are about to spawn from. The difficulty also feels inappropriate here. Again, this could easily be because of the difficulty bug, but coming around a corner going from full health to dead before you can react, it just doesn't feel like what this game is trying to be. There is more, but honestly, this is way longer than I would have liked. Unfortunately, I just didn't feel like I could not talk about any of this, which is unfortunate because, as I said, even in spite of all of that, part of me still enjoyed this game. There is something special here, and I'm thrilled that there's going to be a remake, but there just isn't any way that I can recommend the game in its current state. Without the bugs or technical issues, I would likely have given this a slight recommendation with a lot of caveats, but in its current state, and with Remedy's recent track record, I think most people would be far better off waiting for the remakes to happen. So that's where I'm going to leave it. The next game will be Dredge. If you liked the video and would like to see more of the same, maybe subscribe. Also, throwing a like on the video would be greatly appreciated. And with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.